Hey everybody, my name is Sam Pedro, and today I am talking about the book The Pioneers by David McCullough. And today's video I want to talk about what the book is about, what I learned, and share what I thought about the book. I've read a couple of books by David McCullough. I read his biography about John Adams and also the Wright brothers, and I'm also currently reading 1776. And I really like him as an author. I've watched a few interviews he's given, and overall I really like the man. And so I was really excited to look at this book, The Pioneers, which is his latest book. It was written in 2019. The Pioneers is about America's settlement of the Northwest Territory, and also mostly it's about the settlement of the Ohio country. This was America's first great westward expansion after it became a country and after the War of Independence. And so the settlement of the Ohio is a pretty big part of America's history. I didn't really know much about it at all, so I am really glad that this book introduced me to a really important part of our history and kind of how it unfolded. The book is split into three different parts that look at the development pretty much of Ohio. The very first section, it talks about the key players who opened up the Northwest Territory. You read about a man named Manasseh Cutler and what he did, and then also you hear a lot of references to the Ohio Company, which is something that I've heard a lot about. And it was basically a company that heavily invested in land speculation and in other pursuits in the Ohio country, opening the way for people to come in. The first section of the book also talks about what the Ohio country looked like before the pioneers came. It was this great, abundant, resource-filled forest with lots of animals. It talks about the Native American tribes that lived there, and also the ruins, Native American ruins that were there as well, the great mounds. The main location of the book was a town called Marietta, which is in Ohio. And I will say the book actually almost mainly focuses on Marietta and its development. But Marietta, and I had never heard of Marietta before, it's just a little small town in Ohio now, but it was the first settlement, I guess the first Western settlement established after the United States had been organized. And people were just flocking to Marietta. And this was a major theme. So when the book talks about the American ideals that were moving westward, it paints a really good picture of the time and what people thought about westward expansion. And the idea is, there's so much opportunity in this big country, and you could go, and the only thing that it's going to cost you is hard work. So if you go and you work hard, you can go and claim your land, and you and your family, you're going to be better off. With the settlement of Marietta, the book starts talking more about some of the prominent families in this town, and kind of what they did to help shape this community and kind of the surrounding community. And yeah, it starts just giving little stories about this town. For example, at one point it talks about this family called the Blennerhassetts, and they moved to Marietta. They're from Ireland, I believe, and they had inherited all this money, and so they're by far the wealthiest people in the town. And they built this mansion on an island in the Ohio River, and just talks about their story, and they eventually play a big part in a scandal later on. But yeah, it was really fascinating to read about just the abundance of wealth from this one family and how they could just erect this huge mansion among all these small log cabins. But yeah, just interesting story there. But I only tell that because I found a lot of that in the book. Just these little snippets of history attached to Marietta and kind of the surrounding area. Another story I thought a lot about was about a traveling doctor, and I don't remember his name, but he kept a very detailed journal of his doings, and he would go outside of Marietta as this traveling doctor, and he would talk, you go 30 miles out of town, and he'd find these families who were just so poor in these small houses, and they're all cramped and they're all sick. And so he gives a picture of kind of that bleaker side. Everybody is moving there for greater opportunities, but that doesn't fall upon everybody. And so the book talks about that other side, these people who moved there and ended up struggling. The book also talks about the interactions between the Native American tribes that were living in the Ohio country and the settlers that had came. And it was interesting, so reading reviews about this book, and there was a lot of criticism when this book came out about McCullough's portrayal of Native Americans and how it was really offensive. And I don't think I actually found that to be the case. And I'm a Native American, so I'm Apache, and I didn't really find it that offensive. I can see why people were upset, and I think what McCullough was trying to do is he's telling the story through the eyes and through the lens of the pioneers, of these Americans moving west. And yes, there were Native American tribes that lived there and were expelled. And he's quoting, journal entries when they might be called, a savage or whatever. I thought he actually did a really good job at showing the whole picture, but through the lens of the American side. And so I didn't ever feel like he was trying to, say this was so great that they did these things and that they eradicated the Ohio country of all Native American tribes. I never really found that that's an argument he was trying to make. But rather, I thought he did a really good job explaining about what actually happened and explaining it in the terms or through the eyes and the lens of the people and maybe how they talked during that time and how they viewed what they were doing. And so, yeah, it was just an interesting thing that people really latched onto this, that this was so offensive. I'll let you be the judge of that, but I personally didn't find it that offensive. The book also talks about Aaron Burr, and I've been reading a lot of books about American history lately, and I just can't seem to escape some mention of Aaron Burr. And so Aaron Burr was the vice president who killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. And he's kind of in exile, and so he goes to Marietta. He causes up a lot of controversy. He's pretty much plotting against the United States government. So it talks about that as well. I think that's all I will say as far as a summary about the book. That's basically what it's about. Marietta and the Ohio country, a few of the key players, but also a lot of snippets from maybe some forgotten people of history. As far as what I thought about the book, it's kind of interesting. I'm really glad I read this book because it taught me about a slice of history, American history, that I had no knowledge about. So I learned a lot about things that I didn't know anything about. So I loved that aspect of it. But at the same time, there were times in the book where maybe it was a little dry and I felt a little bored. And so it's kind of just a weird mix of times where I loved it and I was learning a lot, and other times where I just felt like it was dragging on. I thought it talked about Marietta maybe a little bit more than it should have, or at least that I found interesting. Because there's other communities, obviously, like Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati, and those get mentioned, but that's just not the focus. And so I thought it could have been broader. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it was a broader expansion of the Ohio territory instead of just focusing on the first community. But that being said, I thought it's still well written. I don't think it's David McCullough's best book. He's written a lot of good books. But yeah, it was enjoyable. So hopefully this review helped you. I know I was kind of on the fence with it, but I did like it. It does teach a lot about an important part of history. So yeah, if hopefully this review helped, leave a comment below if you've read it and what you thought about it, if you thought this review was fair, and I hope all of you have a good day.